So I'm more interested in what NFTs are going to evolve into, not really like what NFTs are today. I'm more interested in it's kind of similar with cryptocurrency. That's why people speculate on cryptocurrency and digital currencies, because there's wonder as, is this going to replace currency, or is it going to replace personal banking, or what types of utility is it going to have down the road? So NFTs for me, digital collectibles, digital assets, still way too early to know what it's all going to mean. And I haven't been putting lots of money into them just because I'm just trying to learn, and watch and see.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Crunch Numbers. This time we bring a little bit of a different topic. I got with me here today Dustin Cooley. He's the finance dad from YouTube. He has around 11K followers or subscribers by now, with a channel that's only a year old. So today we're going to talk about collectibles. So how does the market function? How to get into it? What's the main difference between this type of market and other more traditional investments? We're going to dig up a little bit about NFTs, like what's the impact of new technologies in this sort of market. So thank you so much for coming, Dustin. It's a real pleasure to meet you and have you today. To start, I'd just like to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about your background and explain how you got into collectibles.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me, David. This is great. No, this is awesome. It's kind of nice to be on someone else's live stream. I do live streams on my show, but I always like going on other people's live streams, so I don't have to do all that background work. You guys do a great job. Yeah, as far as my background goes, I do have a finance background and just a lifelong passion for learning about investing, learning about everything related to various finance topics. I like watching all the macro and microeconomic things that are going on in the world. And as far as collectibles go, I've always been a collector at heart. And I just turned 40. So my wife would joke that I've kind of hit my midlife crisis. And now I'm back into, collectibles that I used to have, from my youth that now are, attainable. Some of those things that just haven't, when you're a kid, you don't have as much disposable income as when you're an adult. And now we have it. So it's fun.
Okay. Can you tell me what's the main difference between being a collector and actually investing in collectibles?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of discourse on this, because the reason why I say that is there's not consensus across the board as to, the big differences. I mean, I've heard some different things. I've heard investable grade collectibles are something that it's a collectible that's in the top 15% as far as scarcity goes. As far as price goes, which makes it an investable asset. But this is not something that is set in stone. This is not something that is, it's highly debatable, a lot of these things. And so I try, as far as, collectibles go, you really have to kind of distinguish between what are the things that you are buying with just the focus on buying to sell it later on. Maybe it's something you're buying to flip. Or is this something that you are okay, holding long term and you want to have it long term? And then does that thing have sentimental value to you, that's outside of just being an investment? So there's a lot of different kind of layers to peel back, I think, when you're looking at collectibles as an investment.
So you've been investing in sports cards, right? And some action figures. Just out of curiosity, because you referred sentimental value, have you ever bought an asset with the intent to sell, but just decide, okay, I'm just going to hold on to this because I like it too much?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it happens all the time. I think that part of what I talk about on my channel is just, this is supposed to be kind of the fun, speculative investments that you have, not necessarily your primary mode of investing, but, something that is fun for you to do that offers kind of a, it's not just, a stock bond or a piece of land or something. It's got some sort of sentimental value. There's nostalgia that's typically tied to a lot of collectible buys. When you look at the reason, why do people collect certain things, invest in certain things? A lot of times there's a nostalgia factor from their childhood. A lot of times it's something like sports cards you mentioned. I was, born in 81. So the sports cards boom in the US was between 1986 and 1994 was really kind of the window where there was a massive sports card boom. And it seemed like every kid in the US had cards, so for me, of course, life happens, you get older, you have, girlfriends and everything else, and you lose interest in those hobbies. And what's happened is there's I would say a large portion of the population, I should say a large portion of the entire population, but there is a large number of people kind of in that 35 to 45-year-old age group that are going back to those childhood hobbies, and then realizing that those hobbies have advanced to where now you have third-party grading, you have the internet, where you can easily buy and sell a lot of these things. And so there's liquidity that was not there in 1988. Basically, if you were buying sports cards or you were buying comic books or whatever it was back then, in 1988, you had to then sell it to your friends, or you had to sell it to the shop, the sports card shop. You couldn't jump on eBay, and sell it, or you couldn't go and sell online. And that's really a major difference between collectibles markets nowadays. That's one example. There's a few. But collectibles markets nowadays versus the way it was 30 years ago when we were collecting as a hobby.
So you mentioned a lot of topics. We'll get more into in depth with them soon. But just like in a superficial level, mainly because I don't want to get too deep into this. But can you tell me the main difference you find between investing in collectibles and other more traditional investments?
Yeah, traditional investments versus collectibles. So collectibles are highly speculative. If you're looking at what you're buying and selling, whereas with traditional investments, you kind of have somewhat of a track record that you can follow. There's, a lot of data that you can follow to try to kind of gauge like, okay, where's this market going? Or does it seem high? Does it seem low? That's where the stock market's been around long enough. The real estate market's been around long enough to where it's a little bit more settled in. It's definitely, well, it's a lot more settled. It's a lot more accepted, I guess. Whereas, with collectibles, some of these markets being actually investable, I would say, are brand new. They're very, very new. Graded video games is one of these graded video, retro video games. That's a brand new deal where third-party grading has come into the mix. And now those are being bought and sold as premium items. And that's a brand new thing. So you don't have that history, to give you any sort of idea of where it's all going. It's all very speculative. You had mentioned NFTs previously before we got on, and it's the same sort of thing. You have kind of these new markets that are emerging, and they might go somewhere and they might not. That's where the big speculation comes in. Whereas if you're buying into, the Dow Jones, or you're buying a piece of property, it's just a different type of a way to invest for sure.
Yeah, very interesting, actually. Can you tell me how does the sport card market work? Like, how do you know if a card is going to appreciate? Is this like a run-of-the-mill supply and demand type of thing?
Yeah, again, highly speculative. The reality is there are no sports card, experts as far as, investing or buying and selling goes. We've just recently hit kind of a boom market over the last 2 years, you might say 3 years, to where prices of a lot of cards have gone way up on a lot of key cards, whether it be Michael Jordan rookie cards or Kobe Bryant rookie cards, or, Joe Namath, or any of these types of things. They were fairly flat for a long time price wise. And then again, you have people coming into the market, massive demand coming in, a lot of it having to do with the nostalgia there's macroeconomic things as well that play into it. I think all the stimulus money that's come in the United States, that stimulus money has to go somewhere. And some people, yes, they lost their job. They're using that to pay bills and so forth. But there's some people that got stimulus money that never lost their job, that didn't really need that money. They got a check in the mail. It had to go somewhere. And they said, well, I like cards. Maybe I'll just spend them on cards. So I think that was part of it. There's a lot of different factors, that play in. But it's really just been kind of the last 2 years has been a boom market. And then actually, though, over the last 4 months, I would say we've been kind of in a dip where things are, correcting or crashing, or however you would explain that. But I think the main thing to just know, though, I guess, is it's just it's highly speculative. It's something that, it doesn't have a set track record outside of, it does have history. Sports cards go back over 100 years. So it's not a brand new market necessarily in the way that like retro video game collecting investing is it's a brand new market. That's something that people just started doing over the last probably 5 years. Sports cards are established in that way, but the way that they're being bought and sold, the third-party grading piece is not that old. The third-party grading in sports cards has only been around for 20 years, which in the grand scheme of things, just not a long time.
Do you believe that being like an expert on sports or being inside the sports world when trading these type of assets will somehow let you spot a good recent card or a card that came out 5 years ago, but now the athlete is going to have a super career, in your opinion? Do you think that makes a difference?
I think it's one factor in being able to prospect certain players that are coming up, but the sports card market is really finicky to where it doesn't always follow those trends. For example, you have great players. Like one example is Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan is he's played center or forward or center for the San Antonio Spurs. He's a Hall of Fame basketball player. He won 5 championships. And for whatever reason, his cards had never really kind of took off. Recently, they did over the last 6 months, they kind of moved up, but not even close. If you're making a comparison between another player that's as established as him, like a Kobe Bryant or somebody that's, won a lot of championships, that's highly accomplished. Kobe Bryant's cards went way up. Tim Duncan's cards didn't, just moved a little bit. So, there is, and then if you're prospecting new players, then yeah, if you kind of have an idea of, okay, I've been watching this player. I've watched his rookie season, or I watched him back when he was in high school or something, and I believe that he's going to be a great professional athlete. Maybe you can buy his or her cards at a low price. And then if they do happen to perform and do those things, and then they can appreciate. But on the other hand, if it's a prospect that everybody is already excited about, so like Zion Williamson would be an example of this in basketball for the Pelicans. He was coming into the league and everybody was very excited about him. His cards were very, very expensive before he ever even got on the court, before he ever even touched played his first game. So it's tricky, and there's things that don't always make sense, which I guess makes it fun to some degree. But yeah, I wouldn't say that being an expert on sports gives you a definitive advantage. It is helpful to kind of know the sport and the players that you're buying into. For example, if I'm going to buy into cricket cards, cricket stickers, I know nothing about the sport of cricket. So it probably behooves me to not buy, not get into that market because I just don't know anything about it. Whereas NFL football or basketball, I feel comfortable about those sports and the teams. Sports cards actually move too based on trades and based on off-season pickups. So if you have a free agent that goes from one team to another team, that can create excitement around that team. And it's the excitement a lot of times that drives the prices up, without even the player even playing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
Following up on that, like, what's your strategy, if you're comfortable about talking about it, when investing in collectibles?
So, and it's kind of evolved over time. I mean, my strategy is I try to buy certain items that, number one, I just love to own. So meaning that if I can't sell it for whatever reason, or I lose a little bit of money on it, I'm okay with that because it's something that I love and enjoy. And then I also kind of on the back end of that, I also pick certain players, or I pick certain, characters. If it's a comic book, for example, it might be a rare Spider-Man comic book. I'm picking certain characters that I think over time are going to have longevity. So it might be a certain, a lot of people in sports cards like to buy like LeBron James and Michael Jordan or Tom Brady, or kind of very established GOATs is what they call them, the greatest of all time type players, because they feel that there is long-term safety in those players because they already have established legacies and careers, it's not like a second year player that could get injured and their career is over and you've got money, and and then your money kind of goes down the tubes. That's the big risk with sports cards are injuries. Injuries are a massive risk because you could have, soccer, with football. I mean, you can have a player that you're very excited about. He's at, he just got moved to transfer to Manchester United. Everyone's excited about him. And then he blows out his knee and he's out for 12 months or 8 months or something. And his cards just kind of do nothing for 8 months or 12 months, just using that as an example. And so injuries are kind of the big risk with players that are still playing, that don't have any established accomplishments. So that's why prospecting is very risky. One reason.
Yeah, and following up on that, because we're talking about risk itself, do you use any sort of discount rates to account for that kind of risk, or liquidity risk, or any other type of risk?
I kind of use, and I don't want to say, I don't have kind of a mathematical formula for all of it, but I do look at, as opposed to really focusing on upside risk, I focus a lot on my downside risk. What is the, how much am I getting in on it? And worst case scenario, if this thing goes to zero, how is that going to affect my life? Or what are the odds that it's going to go to zero, based on the player? If it's a Michael Jordan card, is it realistic that that's going to go to zero? Probably not. I mean, it's probably because of all the collectors, all the Michael Jordan fans and collectors, it's fairly safe. So it just depends on what price point are you getting in on that particular card and that particular grade. And that's where for me, that's where I'm always trying to find value. And and what's great now is there's a couple of great sports card data tools that do track historical data on cards. And so that's very helpful because now you can kind of see, okay, this card is priced X today, and 5 years ago it was this price. So that's how you can kind of see like, okay, this feels like a good price based on where prices have been.
Okay, yeah, and we've mentioned a lot of times third-party grading along this conversation. Like, how does that affect the collectibles markets?
Yeah, so the number one reason that third-party grading, there's a couple different reasons, but the number one is authenticity. So if you are looking at, and a lot of times investment grade, whether you're talking about baseball cards or you're talking about comic books, investment grade are vintage older items. Those are the items that are really worth the big money. It's the Babe Ruth baseball cards. It's the first appearance of Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15, comic books. But what's important to someone that's buying it, kind of similarly to the art market, if you think about the art market, the big thing that they want to know is that an original Picasso or is it a fake? That's the thing that's most important to somebody that's buying art. I would think. I'm not an art buyer, but I've got to assume if you're going to spend, $10 million on a painting, you want to know that it's one of one, and that artist did it, that it's a real thing. So third-party grading guarantees authenticity, and that, or it should. There's different graders out there. Some do and some don't. But the major players, they guarantee that when they grade a card and they give it a grade, that they're authenticating that is a real card, that it's not reprinted, that it's not faked in any sort of way or altered. That's the whole purpose of it. And they have guarantees. They've got insurance and those sorts of things to pay if they're wrong. So that is the biggest, and that's what legitimizes these markets. Because 30 years ago, when I was a kid and collecting sports cards, there was no third-party grading. So you were literally arguing with the dealer. This is a near mint copy. No, it's not. It's only fair condition. You're arguing about the condition. Third-party grading takes that away to where it's like, nope, this is a reputable grader. They gave it a grade of an 8 out of 10. And there's a price point that's associated. There's a price range associated with that particular grade for that particular card. So third-party grading for all collectibles markets. I mean, the big thing is are they reputable grading companies? That's where, that sort of trust is built over time. Sports cards does have reputable grading companies. Comic books do as well. Coins, currency. There's a lot of people that collect U.S. currency that's 100 years old. That's rare. So once you add in third-party grading, it just legitimizes those markets because then you're not. Then when you invest big money in something, you've got that kind of that guarantee or that I guess that it makes you feel good that it's been looked at, it's been authenticated.
So it sounds like it's much easier now to invest in those kind of assets, right? I can imagine, and we talked about this earlier, like how technology has affected the way the market plays out. Like 20, 30 years ago, it'd be much harder to have to say to your friends at a comic book shop, right? So has technology affected it? Like how liquid is it to really buy it and sell this kind of assets?
Yeah, well, on a basic level, eBay just coming around 20 years ago, eBay makes it, and really, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but eBay is the largest buying and selling platform for sports cards and for a lot of collectibles is eBay. A lot of people wouldn't realize that because maybe they use Amazon for a lot of things or they use other sites, but eBay is really where a lot of it is done. And then also, on the back of that, now you have large auction houses like Golden Auctions or Heritage Auctions, and they're all posting their auctions online. So anybody can access those auctions at any point. And so, if you're someone that says, okay, I want to invest in this, how do I get involved? All it takes is a few clicks just to find those big auction houses, run a few searches, and all of a sudden, all these very rare items that 30 years ago you would have to find through word of mouth and at antique shows or however you would find out where those items are located. Now they're at right at your fingertips. Technology allows you to to access them. And then also this is also fairly new as well, but fractional ownership, in a similar way that Robinhood does this for stocks, fractional ownership has arrived as well for collectibles. So if there's $1 million baseball card that I'm never going to afford, I can buy shares of it, as the same way that I would with a share of Amazon, if I was using Robinhood, let's just say as an example. So technology is advancing. There's other online platforms that are coming in that want to compete with eBay to buy and sell sports cards. And there's also the same thing for other collectibles. So yeah, I mean, you've got all these kind of marketplaces that are popping up and different ways to invest in collectibles.
Yeah, and following up on that, me particularly, I'm a gamer. I like those kinds of things, and when I think about collectibles, well, I assume they could go up to hundreds, thousands, maybe, But you just mentioned like $1 million sports cars. Like, how fairly common is that? Like, are there many out there with that kind of price range?
You would be surprised. There's a lot more in that price range than you would think. I mean, and not even just sports cards, but sports cards falls under sports memorabilia. So there's also, like, for example, there was a sale of a Kobe Bryant signed game worn jersey, Lakers jersey that he wore his rookie season. And I mean, the jersey sold for over $3 million. And it's just a signed jersey that he wore in his first season playing in the league. I thought that was high. I mean, I never thought that a piece, because they sell a lot of signed basketball, signed footballs, and those sorts of things. And that stuff as well has gone way up in price. For sports cards, it's the very rare things. It's the very rare Mickey Mantle cards or Babe Ruth cards. There's Michael Jordan cards, LeBron James cards, but kind of at the very top tier of the scarcity. When we talk about collectibles, yeah, it's all about supply and demand. And so if supply is very low and you have a very scarce rookie card or insert card of that particular player, I mean, Messi and Ronaldo have very expensive cards as well. I didn't even realize that they had cards until, a few years ago. But yeah, I mean, you'd just be surprised at the price points. 7 figures is more rare as far as $1 million plus. But when you get into 5 figures, there is $10,000 and up, between 10,000 and 100,000, there is a lot of supply in that price range. And then even if you go from 100,000 to 1 million, there's still quite a bit of supply there. It's mind blowing, really. I mean, you would think that there's only maybe a couple of cards that go for a few $1 million, but it just keeps on, there's just more and more that keep on popping up.
Yeah, that's absolutely surprising. Like, now it makes sense to buy, fractional shares of collectibles, of course. But talking about the pandemic, because we always have to talk about the pandemic at this point, how do you think it's affected the market?
In a big way for a lot of these things, because in the US, and I can't speak for, I know you guys are in Europe. I don't know if it's happened the same way there, but in the US, people were at home, whether they were out of work or working remotely from home. And I think people just had more time on their hands. And then of course you've got the people that are middle-aged like me that are, looking back at some of their, kind of the better days, everyone's kind of, depressed about the pandemic, and, they're thinking about these old hobbies and like, man, they're like thinking about getting back into these old hobbies. And I do think that that did play a lot into kind of the boom or the spike. But I will tell you that this stuff was already on the rise before the pandemic. And I think the pandemic was just like an extra shot in the arm that just kind of got it over the hump, because it was a market that was already moving. It was trending upwards. And ironically, a lot of people, including myself, thought that once the pandemic happened, the prices would go down and people would be kind of selling off their stuff because they need to pay bills and things like that. And it was the opposite that happened. Actually, it was more people kind of getting involved and spending into that market. So I do think that a lot of people were at home just kind of contemplating their lives and got back into old hobbies for sure.
By the way, when you mentioned that, looking back, nostalgia and all that, do you have like a special room in your house where you like collect all the memorabilia and you just go there and just look and revive the old days in a way?
Yeah, I'm in that room right now. It's my office. I don't know if I can turn this around. Let me see if I can turn this around, but this is where I film my YouTube channel. But these are kind of all my, the pictures on the wall are all of cards, and I've got like a display case over here. I don't know if you can see that, but so I've got, so I mean, absolutely. For the YouTube channel, I've got a lot of the stuff in the same room. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it all day. So I don't know if it's, it just makes me happy. And so I've got a dedicated room to it. And my wife probably just wants to keep it out, like keep it in one room so it's not all over the house.
I gotta say that's like a long-term dream of mine. Just that sort of room with collectibles things I enjoy. Like it looks amazing, by the way. Really like.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my mother-in-law is an artist, so like the paintings are all of cards, and she painted them for me. So that was kind of nice. I didn't have to go out and spend a lot of money on that stuff. She made it for me.
And maybe when your YouTube channel eventually booms, like it for sure will, maybe those paintings will work as a collectible of some sort, right?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. That's a good point.
So backing on the topic of technology, like how did the emergence of NFTs affect the collectible world? Do you think at some point will they replace physical collectibles, or are they like just a separate thing?
I think they're definitely a separate thing. I really don't think that they'll ever replace collectibles. And I just think that it's just been around too long. If you look at sports cards and comic books and that stuff, they've just been around. They're entrenched in our culture. Those characters. I mean, if you look at like Marvel movies and DC movies and all this stuff, I mean, those are the highest grossing movies that we have in the US are comic book movies over anything else. Sports is really kind of the happiness here in the US. I'm sure it is there as well, but sports is everything. Whether you're into baseball, basketball, football, or any of it. So I just think that cards, and there's just a deep history of it. I think I'm bullish on kind of physical collectibles long term, but I do think that NFTs are a thing as well. I mean, I think that the younger generations, I'm starting to get old, I just turned 40. So, but I do have a little brother that's 20 and he owns NFTs and he's doing kind of his stuff. I own some of it. I got into NBA Top Shot when it first started because I wanted to learn about NFTs and kind of the blockchain and those sorts of things. So I do own NFTs as well. I don't think they'll replace them, but I think that they're going to be a big thing. But I think there's still so much to really unravel. It's so much that we have to wait and see on NFTs. The big thing is, what type of utility do NFTs have? Because for example, I mean, if the NFT is something that you collect, but then it also has some sort of utility at a sporting event. So like if you have a certain, I don't know, LeBron James NFT, are you able to use that to get, better seats at the game? Or are you able to get like, I don't know, popcorn at the game or something, drinks, does it have added utility that makes it more worthwhile to collect it? I think that'll be really interesting. I guess that kind of more commoditizes it, as you were talking about with like, you have something that can be made into something else. How can the NFT benefit you in other ways? Does it have like more of a overarching impact on your life outside of it just being like an image or something that lives on your phone or that lives on your laptop? So I'm more interested in what NFTs are going to evolve into, not really like what NFTs are today. I'm more interested in it's kind of similar with cryptocurrency. That's why people speculate on cryptocurrency and digital currencies, because there's wonder as, is this going to replace currency, or is it going to replace personal banking, or what types of utility is it going to have down the road? So NFTs for me, digital collectibles, digital assets, still way too early to know what it's all going to mean. And I haven't been putting lots of money into them just because I'm just trying to learn and watch and see, and see where it all goes. I do think that it's going to be a thing though. I think it's going to have its own space, but I don't think that it will replace physical collectibles.
So for sure, market to be on the lookout for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. It's interesting for sure.
Okay, just to wrap it up, could you tell me, why should people invest in collectibles?
I think that it has to be more of a love for whatever that you're collecting. I think part of the downfall of investing in collectibles is just looking at it as a monetary thing, to where it's just, I think when people come in and they just want to buy and sell to make money, and there's no kind of attraction to whatever that collectible is, then it's usually kind of short-lived. And like I was saying earlier, you really want to, if you're going to be good at any market, you really need to understand it. You really need to enjoy it. And I think that with collectibles, it's something that is, you've really got to understand the market and really love it, if you're going to get involved in it. I think if it's just purely from a, making money standpoint, then it might not be for you. There should actually be like, outside enjoyment to it as well. And also with collectibles, highly speculative. So only, I would say only money that you can afford to lose. It's kind of like with digital currencies too. All that stuff can go to zero. It just can. So that's always kind of when people ask me about collectibles, it's like, they don't replace traditional investments at all in my mind.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Look, I just gotta tell, I learned so much from our conversation. Like, I was expecting to delve into a new market. I absolutely did. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. We'll leave the link to your channel, the Finance Dad, down in the description below. We'll tell all our followers. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it.